The little green light came on.
Yeah, there you go. Little green light. Should be.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Good evening. Good evening. Welcome to the Chapel of the Cross. Welcome to the My Spiritual Awakening speaker series that is hosted here with Episcopal Campus Ministry and with the support of the Lilly Endowment, Inc., which provides funding for students and this community to engage in reflection around vocation and calling in light of our spiritual relationship. We are excited for the folks who are gathered here in the chapel and for those who are joining us online. And we do know that we have a few viewers who are already tuned into us live. So we give thanks for Maggie Hall, who is a senior here at UNC and a student chaplain. She will be moderating / just having a wonderful conversation with Margo MacIntyre. Margo has over 40 years of history of memories in this church. And also incredible gifts and skills, which she is able to implement as the curator for the Arboretum here, the Coker Arboretum at UNC. So we look forward to learning from your reflections, hearing the conversation that the two of you will have as we invite this community to reflect on our own vocational calling and how our spiritual lives intermingle with that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mary Kat. It is such a gorgeous day, and I always think of Margo on gorgeous days, especially because I'll take a long walk through the Arboretum and just seeing all the beautiful love and care that you put into it. So I'm really excited for this conversation because I'm always excited to have conversations with you, but this one specifically because we're really doing a deep dive. So real quick, if you could just give a little brief introduction to who you are and your relationship to the Chapel of the Cross.
Okay. I was born in Chapel Hill, and I was actually born in the School of Science and Math in Durham. That was the only way I could get in. And I was brought home immediately to Chapel Hill and grew up at the bottom of Raleigh Road in the Greenwood neighborhood and stayed in that same house my entire growing up. And my life overlapped with this church in every way, in many ways. We were close to here. My mom was interested in organ music, so we came to hear concerts here. And then, and we'll talk about it a little bit more, through my best friend and the Scouts, I became more involved with things happening in the Chapel of the Cross.
Yeah, so that actually, you anticipated my first question, which is that I would love to hear more about growing up, your relationship with the church as a building and Christianity as a concept, and where those two collided and where they didn't, just growing up.
Well, my relationship with the church, my mom was raised Southern Baptist, and she was a religion major at Meredith College. She started off as an organ major, but changed. And my dad was an engineer, and they came to Chapel Hill in the early 50s, and they lived down Franklin Street. And it was a much smaller town, and there were a lot of overlaps between the Playmakers Theater and the Chapel of the Cross, and the School of Radio, Television, and Motion Pictures, and the theater groups. So there was always this overlap. And the fact that my house was down through the woods and across the Fun Creek to play in, we ended up here on campus, just walking around, spending time here. But then officially I was here with the Girl Scouts. And every single Thursday afternoon we were in that basement. And then I was a cadet scout in there too, so that's a whole 5 years. And I joined the Explorer Post with Lyman Ripperton, who was on the vestry here. And that was the connection that really sealed it, because he demonstrated service to the community by being a scout leader and by being a person that we could emulate, by being outdoors and supporting people and teaching young people. And he was so dedicated to taking care of us. So we were in that room in the basement, again, once a week. And in the end, being in the church, coming into the church through the Explorer Post happened on Christmas Eves, when Lyman Ripperton, because he owned property out of town, was able to offer the greens for the church. So we would go and cut cedar trees from his property and bring in greens, and for that service, we were allowed to sit on the front row on Christmas Eve. And since the Chapel of the Cross was the only game in town for a late Christmas Eve service, that was a pretty special thing, because later on you really had to be here very early to get a good seat. Okay. And that really stuck, and that combined with my mom's love of choral music and organ music, and listening to that at home a lot, just made me very interested in being in the church. And Dad, since he was raised an Episcopalian, he already knew the liturgy, and I thought, I would sit by him, how do you know this? So we were not raised in the church, but through our raising, we were here. And so, yeah.
That's really such a unique relationship, I think, with a building and a community at large. So I wanted to move a little bit to your work with the outdoors and God's creation. So I know that you said early on you were a member of the Explorers Post, which is a branch of the Boy Scouts that was co-ed. So at what point did you kind of decide or realize that this was going to become a major part of your life and who you were?
I think it just followed me. My parents were also, my dad was a vegetable gardener, my mom gardened avidly, passionately, ridiculously for her entire life, and her mother did, and my dad's mother did, so that I sort of came by honestly. And Mom's absolute adoration of wildflowers and alpine plants in the Rocky Mountains really kind of spilled down on me, and there was never a trip to the beach where two impatient children sitting in an unair-conditioned car going east, and there's a point when your windows are down where you can smell the ocean. And that is not where you want your mom to say, "Alan, stop the car. There's something pink in that ditch, and we have to see it." So we would, my brother and I would, be fighting and whatever. So we would stop and look at wildflowers, and so that it was just threaded through everything. And then also, when my best friend moved in next door, we spent every nice hour outside. We were never indoors. We had tick bites, and we had mosquito bites, and I could identify poison ivy from a really, really young age. So that was not a problem that we had. And we built forts, and we squished leaves and made things out of flowers, and had dolls in the woods where the moss was really thick. So we were really below Gimghoul Castle. There was an amazing moss patch. And we were out in it all the time. And that was, it just happened.
That's so wonderful. You've talked a lot about how your mother and father influenced you growing up. I wanted to ask if you could talk more about them, especially in transition periods, especially when you were starting a family of your own.
Yes. We were married right here. It was full, right? George is here. And it was before air conditioning. So my cousins were here with children, and the children were outside the windows nursing and crying, and it was wonderful. But their influence was loving. I don't know that we weren't a family that said, "I love you," in those words. But through the things that they did for us, Mom and Dad came to all my soccer games. They loved doing things with the Scouts, and they did learn, like most parents have learned, the best way to hear what's going on with your children is to take them and their friends somewhere in the car, because the kids talk and the parents can hear and observe. And I'm not sure I answered your question.
That's okay. So you have 2 children, correct?
Yes. Oh, yes.
Yes. I was wondering if you could tell me a little bit more about Gordon and Weston.
Yes. Twins. That was one of my claims to fame. That was just a surprise and an amazing thing, and one of those times where people say, "I don't know how you do it." But the very first appointment I went to, we were having twins, so you do it. and you get bigger faster, and people are always really interested. And I ended up being on bed rest for 7 weeks, and my mom came and brought George and me food for a whole week. Every single Monday, she would stay Monday through Thursday or Friday for the whole 7 weeks. And she was nervous, as I think all grandmothers-to-be are. But they were born, and they were absolutely perfect. And I turned out to be very, very good, and Boykin can say, at nursing them. And so that became another way that as being a parent, I could share that part of parenting, which is breastfeeding children and listening to children and kind of learning to follow your heart by being a parent. And I guess through the La Leche League and their philosophy of you trusting your heart and knowing that you know what's right for your family, that really helped us, in just regular times with small children. And then later on, as Weston and Gordon came through into the church, and then in EYC, and then as Weston came out to us as transgender when he was 19, I think, and that I didn't get to share with my mom. So, but I know that she would have, in the same way that George and I did, completely trust this person to know themselves best. I can't explain it, but Weston was so very sure and confident that it wasn't, it was hard. And George and I became, I think, much stronger through that, because we were able to say, well, okay, this is something I can't understand, but we love this child. And that was it. And Gordon also was being very, very accepting. And it was much better at pronouns than we were. And that was pretty special. And I think the fact that Weston was comfortable with it and could follow what he felt had a lot to do with the support he had from the EYC here every week, maybe twice a week, and being able to go to clergy here and know that that was safe information. That was pretty special, and it made me have a deeper faith, because as soon as he told me, I thought, well, those dreams are over. He felt called to serve in the church when he was probably 13. And I thought, well, that'll be that then. And it hasn't been like that at all. It's been a really wonderful community support system for him and for us.
So, as I understand, he is currently in divinity school?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, you talked a little bit about your emotions the first time that he told you. But I guess how has your spirituality and emotions developed seeing your son go through divinity school?
Well, again, trusting him to do what he knows he needs to do. We've never had to really follow up with things, and I trust him to know know himself and know what he needs. And I've also learned that he tells me things that he's learned, and I'm way behind. I'm on a journey that is just beginning, and it's fascinating to hear him learn and be fascinated by it. Yeah, so.
That's really fantastic.
Yeah, and I guess I can say too that when he was 10, we were facing the end of my mom's life. We had one day, and I kind of knew it was one day. So I told Weston, I said, George and Gordon are here. You can go home with them, or you can stay, but it might be hard. And he said, well, I want to stay. And I thought, wow, this is really, I would have been in the car home to Mooresville in a heartbeat. And so I knew that was something special, that he was able to hold that kind of thing in him. And that made me feel stronger. So that was pretty neat. And then also being able to come here during the whole, during Lent and Holy Week, and then all the way to Pentecost, was a really, it was a very forming thing for my faith, being able to sort of be in the 40 days, and then the joy, and then and the rest. And it was powerful, and it was powerful because of the music that Van Quinn brought to this community, and how much it was tied to the liturgy and to this community in such a deep way through generations. Yeah, so, I mean, the music is huge.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the music, actually,
Okay.
because I did want to ask you. So you are one of our most stalwart members of the choir. Beautiful, beautiful singing voice. So I just wanted to ask about your relationship with music and God, because I know that it's a different relationship than just music in general.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad that you asked that. And my first church experience was probably learning the hymn "For the Beauty of the Earth" in 3rd grade in public school in Chapel Hill. And I thought, wow, this is really neat, because I didn't go to church, and it wasn't part of our normal conversation. We said a blessing before our meals at my grandparents' house, but not at my own home. And I thought that was a really neat connection, and an amazing connection between God and creation. And then most of the scripture that I know is from the anthems that we sing and from the hymns that we sing. And it gives me a way in, but I don't, I wasn't raised in the church, so my Bible school was with Dr. Quinn and now Joe Cosby.
Great. So you've been around Chapel of the Cross for quite some time. What drove you towards becoming a more active part of ECM and hanging out with us?
That's that connection with gardening and nature brought me close because my job is next door to the Chapel of the Cross. And there have been a few times where I will see a student that I've seen that I would see at ECM or in church on a Sunday, and I would wave at them, and they would just make a strange face, and I say, oh, well, I'm usually wearing a choir vestment, so I don't usually have mud on my knees, and I'm not always filthy. And so I kind of made a habit of waving at people that I would see, and eventually I got to know almost every student resident who's lived in here, and a number of those students have gone on to divinity school, and then I was always observed ECM, the meal, because sometimes you can smell it. and then because I was on the Buildings and Grounds Committee, and I had the opportunity to learn of the empty basement room, I asked if we could have our office down there, because our office was in the basement of Davy Hall with no heat and no air conditioning and no chairs. So we had chairs, but it's really truly a basement HVAC space. And so we were able to move into heated, air-conditioned space where all of our books will fit. So it just kind of overlaps all the time. And now I get to see you. And now that I'm with ECM, I get to wave at lots of people who know all my different clothing types. So.
And we are very grateful that you do.
Mm-hmm.
So with your work in the Coker Arboretum, first, how did you come across that job specifically? And then kind of lean into a follow-up. How has, if at all, has your job impacted the way that you view creation?
Well, again, this is the thread that goes and comes is that my mom was a really active volunteer at the North Carolina Botanical Garden through my whole growing up, and I would spend spring break volunteering in the back hall at the North Carolina Botanical Garden. And before there were even buildings there, it was customary for school groups to tour over there. And so one of my friends and I went on a tour in the Botanical Garden, just in the woods. And they said, anybody know what this is? Not you two. You stop answering. So I was associated with the Botanical Garden through my whole life. And for a really long time, people who started working there worked there their entire careers. And so when somebody resigned from a position in the Arboretum right before we moved back here, I applied for that job as the assistant curator in the Arboretum. And I remember the first staff meeting there. I can't believe that I'm actually doing this. This is so amazing because the Botanical Garden does conservation, and they do gardening, and they do teaching. And it's a pillar of the conservation community in Chapel Hill. And I am lucky enough to work outside. And there's not a day that goes by that I don't take a picture of something that is amazingly beautiful. And I try to encourage everybody to go out there, even if it's cold, even if it doesn't feel exactly beautiful like today, because it really does. I think it helps. And I was going to say that in the times when I was really struggling with anything, really, but mostly after Weston came out to us, I would be at work, I would be in the Arboretum, I would go home, and I would go straight back outside, and I would walk. And it really helped. And yeah.
I don't quite know if I'm phrasing this correctly, but I'm going to go for it anyway. When the Episcopalian Church decided to make creation care a primary focus of their work, I guess what was your reaction to that? Or was that just something that's like, yeah, long time coming?
I was heartened by that, and I enjoy being I'm also on the Creation Care Committee and trying to wrestle with my own footprint and helping people live smaller, maybe. And that actually, I'm glad you mentioned that, is that in the prayers of the people, when we pray for the creation and the wisdom and the will to conserve it, that came to me as a 17-year-old, and I said, aha, this is, yeah, I like that. And that little bit of the prayers of the people really was powerful, and to have it followed up with creation care as a facet of what we do is important. Mm-hmm.
It's really wonderful. That about wraps up my questions for you. But I would like to open the floor to anybody else who might have a question for Margo. And I'll go ahead and facilitate that. But, yeah.
Thanks for doing this.
Yeah.
Can you walk me through just an average day with your job?
So just walking through hours of the day with the job.
Okay. It's 5 degrees warmer here than it is at my house. That's a good thing. The fact that I have a heated office also is a good thing. So these cooler mornings, I walk beside the Arboretum and look and see what's going on. And we do record keeping if we go indoors. Most days that does not happen. I don't come inside at all on Tuesdays until ECM. And we usually walk around and see what needs to be done, make sure there's not anything unsafe. We see what's blooming. My coworker Jeffrey and I both share a fascination and wonder. So we'll say, oh, I can't believe these things have come up from seed all the way over here. How did they get here? Or something that we transplanted we weren't sure was going to do well, and we're finding we're dividing it and moving it around, and it's not an invasive plant. It's something that belongs there. That's really satisfying. And then we do spend a lot of our time working with the college students who are work-study students, and that is actually probably the most rewarding part of it, is working with the students and seeing how they learn and how they grow over the years that they're with us. We have a cap and gown that if they work with us for 2 years and they're the right size, they can wear the cap and gown. We do. We lend it out, so a lot of students have worn them.
That's so fun.
But it is really, really special to breathe the rhythm of a campus. Mm-hmm. And I think today, I feel like with the sun out and everything and spring break over, somebody has pressed the accelerator, and things just feel really different. And then when exams start, it goes as quiet as can be, and there are no students. And then after some people are finished, they start trickling back out into the lawns, and there's cheering. And on the last day of class, we have bubbles, and we will enjoy that. So, and every day is completely different. Even if we plan it and we think we know what we're going to do, sometimes it goes all off the rails, and usually it doesn't matter.
Nice. Yeah.
This might be an unfair question, but do you have a favorite plant?
Do you have a
Oh,
favorite
gosh.
plant?
Today, I think would be the little sweet Betsy. It's a trillium.
It's just a really cute name.
It's a cute name. It's a trillium, and it is a native wildflower that you can find in the woods here, between where I grew up and here. And it has a tall red flower and 3 trinity leaves. And what's cool about it is that the seeds usually fall right underneath the plant unless an ant carries them very far away. But you can go out there and find one that has germinated this year, and then a little bit bigger leaf that germinated last year, and then the 3-year-old ones have their 3 leaves, and then the next year the 3 leaves are bigger, and it takes about 5 or 6 years for it to bloom. But it's a tough plant, but it doesn't look like it is. So.
I love that.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else? Yeah, sorry.
Have you ever thought of applying for a mental health grant for the Arboretum?
Ooh,
I think it has a big impact on mental health for anybody in this room.
It's interesting that I have thought of things like that, and I've also thought of introducing a program for LFIT.
Ooh, so the question,
First-
by the way, for people online is, have you ever thought about applying for a mental health grant in combination with the Arboretum? Alpha would be interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, please continue.
Yeah, because I've thought that raking is really, really good for. I don't know.
It's Lifetime Fitness, I believe, is what that stands
Lifetime
for.
Fitness.
Is a required class for UNC students to just take one of them, like running or racket sports or something like that.
Weightlifting or badminton, but you could come out and rake leaves. And you could weed, and 'cause students who come out after their finals, they put it all in their work, and we have students who say, "Oh, I want to work during finals because I need to be outside," and we try to remind them to notice that, and to turn around and look at what they've done, which is really, really satisfying. So, yeah.
That's a very cool idea. Yeah, Mary Kat. A favorite hymn.
Oh, no. I didn't anticipate that. Oh dear. Well, I love For the Beauty of the Earth. We use that in our wedding. And I sing The Mighty Power of God, also from our wedding, but not in the hymnal, I don't think. Or not the tune I know. So, all the Advent hymns, wait, don't get me started. All the Advent hymns and all the verses, preferably. Yeah.
Go for it.
If you had to give a piece of advice to your 19-year-old self, what would it be?
If you had to give a piece of advice to your 19-year-old self, what would it be? And I'll expand that to if you had any advice for the people in the room.
Okay. I was a really shy 19-year-old, and I was not a bold 19-year-old. And I think when we interview students for work-study positions, I was thinking, and I think of this a lot, is I'm not sure I would have landed that position because I was shy, and I didn't say enough. But if the interviewer turned me on, I would have gotten a job in about 3 seconds because it was something that I love to do. So I think making sure you are doing what you are going to look forward to do every day. I don't look forward to bending over all day, but I do look forward to being in the garden and interacting with the students and being part of this whole campus rhythm that is truly amazing. But I thought about taking another degree. I thought about teaching, and I also thought about maybe getting more study in horticulture, but then it would have put me behind a desk. And most of you know that I don't work well on a computer. So, and I'm really happy with that. I mean, I feel really content being able to be outside and to garden all day, and yeah. So, and I really, really appreciate the opportunity to share with all of you.
Oh, you're coming back up. It's like I can't really see you.
I know. Better
Well,
you.
Margo,
than me.
we are thrilled that you could be with us today. I just want to give thanks for hearing some of your story of how you were called into Christian community here in this place, called into marriage, called into motherhood, called into musicianship, called into being a gardener in the midst of this incredible creation and this wonderful place, and called into companionship with so many college students who now you've seen generations come through this place, and you're continuing to give those gifts to us. So thank you for all of the ways in which you share your vocation with us here daily and invite us into the Arboretum and into God's creation in so many different ways on every day of the year, because it's incredible every day of the year. Thank you for sharing some of that with us.
You're welcome.
I'm so glad that we have a wonderful group of guests. In addition to our student community, there is a meal from Med Deli available to those who are able to join us in the campus center. As you've seen, the parish hall is a little bit involved right now with our preparations for the ABC sale, which is this coming Saturday. And so we have just food and sort of informal space, time for conversation with some of our students, and to share some of your stories. So if you're able to join us, please do follow the student leaders who will head that way towards the campus center. And thanks again, Maggie and Margo, for having this wonderful conversation and sharing it with us.
It's the end.
Have a great night.